Hi everyone, in this video I'll be talking about what is it like to work for a digital marketing agency, particularly in the performance marketing. Now in this video I hope to give some sharing in terms of what is the day-to-day life like, and also what are the skills necessary in order to survive and thrive in the agency industry, and also what are the tips and tricks I've used during my stint with the agency throughout that I found that made me able to manage my workload. And again, I also discuss what are the pros and cons of working for a digital marketing agency. Now, just a little bit of background about me itself. I studied accounting and finance in uni. My first job was in the audit line for a Big Four company, so I had a little bit of client management skills I gathered from that job itself. Then I moved on to an in-house finance role. Before making a career transition to work for a digital marketing role in two companies, I was doing essentially in-house marketing and then moved over to an agency. And I've been with the agency for about, say, 2 years, 9 months. Now I'll move on to the first portion of my video, which is what is day-to-day life like working for a digital marketing agency. Now the agency I worked for is a paid performance agency, and what it means is that every time our client, whether they're e-commerce or lead generation, will give us a monthly target. So our job is to help them hit their monthly target based on the ad revenue that the client will give to us. So this includes things like advising them on strategy, for example, looking at the sales funnel, looking at other ways that we can optimize revenue for the company itself through different channels, for example, whether it's their apps, whether it's their email marketing, and things like that basically. So on a day-to-day basis, the day will start out in the morning with me going to the office. Now this was before the pandemic, and then checking my emails and then checking my WhatsApp messages, and then listing down whether there's any urgent things I need to do right now. And also a portion of my morning will be devoted to checking individual clients' campaigns. So typically within the agency background, we are basically assigned 4 to 5 clients per person. Now, each of these clients differ in terms of complexity, in terms of whether they're e-commerce or lead gen, but it's pretty a good mix. So there is a diverse of industries, diverse of people to actually talk to and also communicate with for tasks and also updates and status. So basically, I would check the campaigns and then I'll go through my daily checklist itself. Now, this daily checklist I will actually share with you in the later part of the video, and this is my own creation of how I deal with the day-to-day tasks. Now, I feel that time management is very important in the agency, because when you are handling 4 to 5 clients, there are many things for you to do in the day itself. There's your routine, but there are also ad hoc things that can happen. So that is very, very important to, I feel, to come up with a checklist, to have a systematic way of how to approach your tasks, so that you're able to feel like you're quite consistent in your doing your tasks, and also you're managing communication with clients more effectively in that sense. Now, subsequently, what I learned actually from my boss and also colleagues as well is that to develop a system around things, even communication. So basically, how to manage communication would probably be like this: checking your emails or WhatsApp perhaps every 2 to 3 hours. So I will start maybe 9 o'clock, then 12 o'clock, then 3 o'clock, and then maybe 5 o'clock. So the reason why I say batch your communication, especially in this kind of method, is because if you keep on doing your work and you keep on hearing the pinging of WhatsApp sounds or WhatsApp group sounds for your client that's contacting you, for example, or even whichever communication platform you and your clients use, you get very, very distracted, and it breaks your momentum whenever you're doing your tasks. So what I found useful is that to schedule checking your emails or WhatsApp quite regularly in that sense. So there's a level of system that you're progressively getting work done, but also you're attending to your client as well, and you're making sure that you don't miss out any important messages that your client might give to you, for example. Whether it's, for example, let's say pausing a campaign, for example, let's say the website is down, they're pausing a campaign and they need you to respond quickly, so you don't miss out on anything like that. So the next thing in the day-to-day life of a digital marketer, that also kind of depends, because at the start of the month itself is usually pretty hectic, because we have monthly reporting. And so monthly reporting needs to be done. We have to put forward our findings and recommendations to our clients, so we can advise them what to do next for the next month, and hopefully we have better ways of suggesting how can we hit the target, their monthly target, more effectively. Having said that, on a weekly basis, depending every week itself, depending on the nature of a client, you will have an internal weekly reporting with the agency internally so that everybody knows how is everybody's client doing, or does anybody need additional help. Now, I haven't spoken to too many agency digital marketers out there, but personally I noticed what was very good practice within the agency I worked for is a traffic light system. Now, traffic light system means that for each individual client a person is carrying, for example, they will tell green, yellow, red. Green means you're on track to hit your target, your monthly target. Yellow means that you're lagging behind, but based on the numbers or based on the metrics, you feel like it can be improved upon, so there's not immediate danger. And red means that you're lagging far behind in meeting your monthly target. And also, I think this is a great way for us to like leverage from each other. Whenever people are sharing like their results from their clients, whether green, yellow, red, we pay more attention to clients that have red, for example, that need immediate help. So in some cases, when each of us are sharing our own reporting of the status updates for individual client, we're able to then bounce off of learning from each other. Especially, let's say we have same clients in the same industry. Sorry, if we have different clients working, we have different clients in the same industry. For example, the clothing industry or the skincare industry. So we're able to then realize that, you know, what are the tools or what are the best practices that each client have done on their own in terms of the campaigns, for example, ad creative or even the platform they're running on, that we can then leverage from each other. So I think that's how we can like actually accelerate the level of growth and improvement for the campaigns itself. So then I'll move on to the next item, which is skill sets. Now, as a person that worked in prior industries before I moved on to the digital marketing side, and particularly for the agency, there were many things I felt like I brought with me from different industries that I found helped me in this transition. So I'm just going to share with you. I think first of all, time management is very, very important skill to have, because if let's say you're a marketer and you're dealing with 4 to 5 clients in the agency role, chances are you have to juggle time spent for each individual client. And each individual client will have different complexities, will have different problems, and may sometimes ad hoc problems will occur, something you don't plan in advance, but you know, this is life. But what's important is that being able to craft your own work schedule on a document, on the template that works for you, and something you can refer to very easily on a day-to-day basis, I think it's one thing that will really, really help like alleviate the anxiety whether you miss something out, for example. So for me personally, I will share with you my work schedule of how I designed my own work schedule when I was in the agency. And also I did have this folder management system in Google Drive. So I keep most of my documents in the Google Drive itself because I feel that the Google Drive is able to store everything, and every client gets a dedicated folder in Google Drive. And each client will have I will call it the master working file. Now in this master working file will have certain things like this. For example, each tab would have any username, any sort of account details that is needed, who are the person in charge for the client, their roles, their level of authority, and also their emails. Now, the reason why I actually created this master working file was because personally, I like things to be organized in one place, where I know all the basic details I need to know about this client in one place itself. And let's say I'm working on a client with another team member who's either supporting me or I'm actually supporting that team member itself. I feel that it's easy to actually keep the information in one Google Excel spreadsheet where both of us have access to it. And in that sense, we are working cohesively as a team because we have access to all the important information that is needed. Another thing I'll actually add on to this particular worksheet is the platforms that the client is running. For example, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, Google, LinkedIn. And on another sheet, what we'll add is the budget. The budget and the key performance indicator. How is our performance measured? And I will subsequently break down every tab for you and talk about further details. So basically, this is the skeleton of my working file for each individual client. And what I've decided to do on my own personal basis is I systematically make sure that it roughly looks the same. So I know, or maybe I have a colleague of mine that I'm handing over this client for that person, for example. I know that this person will not have any problems with the handover process because everything is documented. Now, the first thing of all is the account details. For example, what is the brief background about this client? What industry do they work for? What is the market that they're trying to hit, for example? It can be a bullet point form on an Excel spreadsheet. And each of these 5 points, for example, account details, username, passwords, person in charge, platforms, budget, and KPI can be each individual tabs itself. The goal of this system is actually to make things so easy for you to access, but also must be standardized across your clients so that you kind of train yourself to know how to look for certain information when you actually need it. Now, the second the second tab I will talk about is the person in charge. Now, for any engagement itself, it's important to note who is the person in charge that you should liaise with most of the time, and subsequently, is there any other staff members from your client side that will be assisting in engagement, for example, and also, is there anybody from your agency that will be helping you, for example. Now, that could include the business development manager, for example, a colleague that is assisting you, that with a creative or copywriting, for example. And the reason why you want to document that clearly is so that you know who to talk to whenever you're dealing for the particular client's work. Now, personally, I've learned this from my previous ex-bosses in the past when I was in the finance line, and they were always very strict in the sense that they said, if you need to refer to something, you might as well organize it in a way that is very easy for you to access and you're able to pull the information out very, very quickly for your own convenience. So this is the learning I actually took from them. And the next portion is that you should also document what are the platforms, roughly platforms that the client is using for their campaign. The thing to note is the reason why I say you must document the platforms the client use is so that you're very aware at any point in time that you're running campaigns on certain platforms, so you know that you must check those certain platforms that optimize the result, so you don't accidentally miss things out. And the next tab in the working file itself is the budget file. Now, this budget file is basically documenting, for example, how much is your monthly budget? How are you going to break the budget down into different platforms? For example, let's say you break it down to Google Search, Google Display, Google Shopping, Google Discovery, Facebook, and perhaps say TikTok. So having that kind of budget sheet itself where you break the budget according to a certain level of percentage and you document how much you spend for each platform itself, document that on a weekly basis itself, I feel helps to avoid a person from either overspending or underspending the budget. Now, the biggest cardinal rule, or rather sin in the agency, is basically you do not want to overspend or underspend your client's budget, because that will also affect their performance. But however, I think in some cases where clients give us discretion to shift the budget around between the platforms itself, you must be very careful not to run into the mistake of overspending on one platform and making all sorts of mistakes itself. So I personally feel that Excel spreadsheets help you to actually navigate that problem as long as you know how to document it and know what is the mechanics behind you checking or actually documenting the checking process. Now, the reason why I actually developed that mechanic, this entire documentation system, is because I find that the biggest problem in agencies sometimes is that when I see people eyeballing how they calculate budgets or how they calculate actual spend, right, it feels very frustrating because the fear is always that whether you're overspending or understanding a budget. My take is this: use Google and let Google Excel spreadsheet be your best friend, and that alleviates a lot of problem in the sense that you easily can compute things out, everything's documented, and you for sure know that unless your formula is wrong, you should be on the right track to appropriately spend your client's budget according to plan, according to what you guys discuss upon. So that is a very important thing I feel for me. Now, basically, I will then share with you, for example, a KPI sheet. Now, this KPI sheet is something I also designed as well. Like whenever having weekly internal meetings with the agency itself, I will actually document each client. For example, client A, client B, for example, client A to client E. Now, each of the client itself, I will have a screenshot of the Google Analytics performance. For example, let's say their sales performance. And then I will have a little bit of a screenshot of each individual client. So I roughly know at any point whenever we're having the meeting, I can produce the numbers very quickly for the team, and as well as be it tip-top possible when it comes to meetings. I find that meetings are very helpful when people are well organized. So that means that preparing the numbers one day beforehand, so I know exactly how's the performance like, and I already know like what are the problem areas I should address during the meeting, or maybe I don't have to wait until the meeting. I can address it beforehand. So I think that having a system actually enables a person to feel much more calm, centered, and also able to get along with their tasks, especially in the agency life. I think my system of time management is basically having a worksheet for each individual client, having a set system of documentation and processes. But generally, I think what is better in the sense that when it comes to communication with team members is that I personally feel that team members should have access to the working file, and they understand the structure in which you design the working file. So the working file has to be simple enough that like your team member just takes a look at it and knows like, okay, I know things are very clear enough. So let's say, for example, something happened to you, you went on sick leave, emergency leave, for example. A person can easily pick up the client and then move forward. Because I feel in the agency life, continuity of performance and work and credibility to our client is especially important. So I feel whenever we're working with team members, we need to keep each other updated on what's going on, any changes, and that is through working files. So I think working files bridges the gap, enables us to have confidence with our team members in the sense that both of us know what is going on, both of us have a system of how we do things, and it's very easy to communicate based on the worksheet itself. So this is what I found useful. Now, I had a brief experience as well managing a team member, and for me, what I learned from my colleague and from my bosses was this. Coordination with team members, especially on tasks, should be done on Google Calendar, for example. Now, I'll tell you the reason why. When a person is assigning things to another person, for example, right, sometimes we give this person deadline. So one way of us keeping track of the deadline with the other person so we can know when to follow up with them is that we have to document it on the Google Calendar, for example. Now, let's say you're working with your team member within the agency itself. On the Google Calendar, what I used to do in the past is that I would schedule, say, for example, a block within the Google Calendar, and our attention, for example, team member A. So I will put the invitation for team member A, document the points that I already need the person to help me with, have the prior communication with that person, and then basically send them the Google Calendar. So it will appear on their Google Calendar as well, and both of us know that these are the items we agree upon. When there's a deadline, then there is this thing where this person can report back to me and they can say like, okay, I maybe finished 3 out of 4 of these items, we can cross it off then I can cross it off from the Google Calendar. So I think that this works in a sense that there is a structure and also a framework of how to manage tasks. And sometimes when we assign things to people, sometimes we may forget. So one way to actually prevent ourselves from forgetting is to document everything in one place and to keep it as in many minimal places as possible. So I would say this, in working in the agency, right, the most important things to you is your Google Calendar, or the place where you schedule your meetings and your calls with your client and your internal team. Second portion will be your work checklist, and that can be your Google Excel spreadsheet or whichever management platform you prefer. So having these 2 places alone will tell you if you miss certain tasks, right, it must be sitting in either 2 of these platforms itself. So that is how I view time management. And on top of that, I think that's also useful. What I learned is that whenever you're working with a team member, it's important to set some sort of 10 to 15 minute check-in with your team member. And this is to address any issues that can come across on the end, and also to maybe keep each other informed. So then again, also to set a short 10 to 15 minute meeting with your team member. But I feel the general gist of a meeting should always be about understanding what are the things you're going to discuss in advance, write it down in the Google Calendar in that sense, and then basically send it to the other person. So that's the way you keep track of time, and also that's the way you organize and block things out, so you are also able to have that weekly catch up with your team member. If you feel like anything is missing, or you need to like just have that check-in so that everybody's on page. Another portion of time management I think is essential is the mastery of automation. When I say automation, I mean things like batching of tasks. For example, like I said just now, is that whenever you're having WhatsApp calls or emails, you check it at 3 intervals or 4 intervals. For example, 9, 12, 3, and 5. Now, the reason why you do that is because whenever you're doing your tasks, you do not want to be interrupted by the constant pinging by different clients. Now, that will mean that you have to break your momentum from doing your tasks. Then as you entertain the call, then you get back to your task, you're a bit frazzled, or there might be some issue that they need you to urgently deal with. So what I discovered when I was working in the agency is that batching your time ensures that you are doing your tasks, getting things done, also you're responding on a very consistent basis to your client. So you're not leaving too much gaps in terms of the tasks or even the communication in that sense. And I think that's especially helpful because when you're in an agency, you're dealing with multiple clients. You must be able to balance things out, and I think having a system enables one to keep everything in check so everything does not feel overwhelming. Another part of automation I think works with the digital marketing side, especially for paid performance marketing, is the reporting side, is actually Google Data Studio. Now, go to Google Data Studio and then check it out, because Google Data Studio is essentially I would say like a pivot table. Now, where you get your data, you can find connectors. For example, Facebook has Facebook Supermetrics. Google has Google Ads connector and Google Analytics connector that's for free. Now, once you connect all these data sources to your Google Data Studio itself, you're able to play the data and display the data like a pivot table, or even with charts and stuff like that. So things you can actually like automate a lot of reporting. Now, this is especially good because I think if you can automate certain tasks, then you can spend more time on carving out the findings and the recommendations of what to do next for a client. The money, I feel, is actually in the findings and recommendations. So the more time you're able to spend on findings and recommendations and less time spent on creating reports from scratch, actually getting more automated on Google Data Studio, that's going to help you significantly. Now, the second skill that I find very important in the agency is client management skills. What I mean by that is that, are you able to understand what your client wants, address what your client needs, actively and proactively provide solutions from them before just reacting reactively? And I feel this skill actually comes along with time. But I personally feel like this skill comes along with time and also comes with a lot of observation. What are good practices and how do your colleagues also manage clients? In many cases with different clients in different industries, there are multiple challenges that they are also facing, and also there are targets for them to achieve as well. So in some contexts, what I feel is that having this understanding that they also have targets, we are also trying to help them achieve their targets. In a sense, we are supposed to work as a team. And I guess whenever we have that mindset itself, we are then able to figure out how can we contribute to them so that they can achieve their targets and everybody goes away from this thing happy. Having said that, I think it's about building trust with clients, and it takes time. And that, I believe, goes through doing good work in the sense of hitting your targets, or even actually documenting in terms of experiment sheets or documents as to what you're doing to actually help them improve their performance. Now, a little tip I actually learned from the agency is this. Something we call experiment sheets is that what are the things that we're doing for this week itself that is going to help towards the performance. So what we do is, for example, in this experiment sheet, you have things like platform. You will have things like your objective. You have things like what is the task you plan to do? What is the outcome? Again, we operate by the traffic light system. The green means you're okay. It provided a good outcome. Yellow means you need more time. Red means that experiment actually did not give any result, and therefore you decided to stop the experiment. Now, the reason why you need to provide this documentation sheet is because I realized over time, right, as a marketer, we do multiple things for our clients. Things we feel will improve the client's performance. But if the client does not know this, or we're waiting until the monthly reporting to actually tell them about it, they might not actually feel like actually doing things, but actually we are. I think a very important part of communication with client especially is communicating to them against using a simple system like an Excel spreadsheet, so that when we give access to this Excel spreadsheet to them, view access, they can come inside and see like, oh, there are so many things this agency person has done for me. Some of it may work, some of it may not work, but the fact that they actually know you're doing something to improve their performance actually does make them feel happier, and also they know that you're actively trying to help things. So you're always giving them visual evidence of the fact that you're actually helping the result. So now I'll move on to the next skill I think that's incredibly important, which is the ability to learn rapidly. Now, I feel the ability to learn rapidly means that you are able to proactively learn things. If you don't know how to do something, there's always the internet. The internet can guide you, or the respective ad platforms can guide you how to set up ads and things like that, or to how to do tracking, or how to ensure that tracking is correct. I feel that with the ability to learn rapidly, one best practice I took away from the agency is that the agency had this monthly sharing. We had 2 sharings in a month, every alternate weeks, and each team, maybe there are 4 to 5 people in the team itself, they would share like what platform they tried things on and what is the learning they got from. And the reason why you get individual team members to share their experiences, right, is to create conversation within the team and share the experience in the sense that, okay, let's say I have this clothing industry. I tried, for example, TikTok. Then I could say, when I tried this TikTok, for example, what are the best practices that I observed? What made the result great? And maybe another colleague of yours also has a client in the clothing industry, but they have never tried TikTok before. So this can be an opportunity for us as an agency to actually leverage very quickly in our learning. So I believe is that structure of knowledge sharing on twice a month that enables everybody in the agency to rapidly share and exchange experiences, which I think is very important as a team. Not only that, I feel that the ability to learn rapidly also means that you must be open to hear a lot of things that your boss say, your colleagues say, and to really try to embody and try to understand why they're telling you certain things. For example, a framework of how to solve problems, or for example, the problem-solving mindset. For example, what I learned previously was who, what, when, why, how. When you ask yourself these simple questions and you try to dig deeper in terms of the answer itself, chances are you'll find more insight as to how can you provide better findings and recommendations for your client. Now, the key, I believe, to providing better recommendations and findings for your client is that you must be able to train yourself to dig one lower deeper. And that will come in, I think, through overtime, but also in the sense that being open to grab as much information, as much learning from each other. So there will be different people in your team, for example, a copywriter, for example, a creative person, for example, a business development person, for example, a person that is more proficient or technical on certain things, for example, a person that builds data warehouses and creates Google Data Studio reports, for example. There's always so many things you can learn from each and every person. But the question is whether you know how to ask them the right questions, or you know how to engage them in conversation so that both of you are actually expanding the things that you have to offer for your client. So I think able to harness different people within the agency itself is extremely helpful. But for that to happen, I think that one has to be very curious, ask a lot of questions, how we can do better, how can we get better results, for example, what is it that we're not seeing that we can improve upon. So I think that kind of mindset is part and parcel of an agency basically, because in that sense you're trained to always think that we must be able to do better. How can we do better? How can we make sure that we hit our targets, for example? So now I'll move on to the pros and cons of actually working in an agency. Now I'll talk about the pros. Personally for me itself, when I went to the agency, I felt that my level of growth in terms of paid performance marketing it just shot up. Because I was exposed to so many things by different people, by my colleagues, by my boss, and I was exposed to different things. For example, they would talk about, okay, this is happening within the platforms itself, or that person would talk about, oh, I run this kind of campaign on a different platform, I'm getting good results. Or maybe someone would say like, oh, I had this problem, for example, at the Facebook ad got banned by Facebook, for example, and this were the kind of things that we suspect might cause the issue. So the level of growth and learning is exponentially very, very high, because the nature of the industry means that you deal with multiple clients, multiple industries, and also multiple problems that could crop up. But as well as if you have the initiative to learn and grow, and you are willing to like go through the learning curve, I think is a great experience, honestly speaking. And for somebody, let's say somebody's actually leaving the university and starting their first job, I would highly actually recommend you to work for an agency. Especially you're looking to be very good in the marketing industry, because I feel the agency gives you that kind of push, the kind of learning exposure that you will otherwise not learn. And from somebody that's been reading books and stuff like that for marketing platforms and like marketing concepts and things like that, I think agency is the best place to actually start to put these things into practice. Because a lot of times when we learn or we read from other people's books, sometimes we can't really like understand what they mean, or if application is not there, then what we read becomes virtually just things in our head that we can't even translate to actual results. So agency is the best place to actually put a lot of things into practice, that what you have learned, what you read, and try to see how does it impact the results for each individual client. One thing I really do appreciate a lot about the agency life is that there's always this mentality of constant improvement. And I feel that stems from the fact that whenever you're given a target, instead of feeling like you can't achieve the target, you always ask yourself like, okay, let's break down this target into something how are we going to achieve it? How are we going to look at areas that we can contribute to this target, basically? And having the mentality, I feel that it also did affect me in other areas of my life, in the sense that if we are able to hit the target for the client, and we're able to find a way, devise a way, a better working style, when we are working with the client, for example, the same level of improvement can be also applied to different aspects of our lives. So that is one thing I found very valuable working for an agency. The pro of working for an agency also is the informal dressing, for example. I find that maybe the agency that is more casual, I use the word corporate, so I could find the culture is a little more casual in a sense. But of course, I think the main priority is always given to performance, performance, performance. How do you help your client with their performance? So clothing, when I was in the agency, it was a little bit more casual, jeans perhaps, and with a collared shirt, or a little bit much casual with sneakers, for example. But what I think is important, because we are we're not so much on the client-facing side. Other than our monthly meetings with the client, say face to face, then we have to dress up a bit better in a sense. But if you like the kind of casual vibe in terms of the dressing, then agency is the right place for you. Another aspect what I really enjoy about working for the agency is that you have actually opportunities sometimes to work with other agencies as a side by side on a particular project together. So then you're able to actually listen to another agency, for example, let's say they handle social media creation. You get to listen to how the other person presents in a monthly meeting to the client. It's the same client both of you are working on. So in some sense, your learning and growth actually expands even further. Your opportunity to network with each other in the agency actually broadens as well. And with that also comes a level of, you kind of notice that because the other person on the other agency, for example, let's say they provide the creative or the copywriting, you start to notice like what is it that you can actually learn from them, they can actually implement to your own clients or even offer suggestions. So in a sense, I would say that opportunities are always endless, honestly speaking, when it comes to working for agency. The question is how much are you willing to absorb, and how fast can you absorb it as well, and how fast can you perhaps implement it in practice. Questions some people might ask is that, let's say they're working in a prior industry, are they able to transition easily to the digital marketing and work for an agency? Honestly, I think it does depend. It depends on your willingness to perhaps make up for the lack of maybe say technical knowledge, or maybe try to impress upon your future employer, for example, that works in the agency, that how is it that you're able to take your skill set from your previous industry they're working for, and how you're able to translate that to help them or to be a good fit within the agency life. So for me, at the time when I interviewed to work for the agency, I tried to sell the hiring manager basically on the fact that I had prior experience in client servicing. I was working in audit. So I kind of knew the lifestyle that is required, the kind of pace, as well as the level of service that I'm expected to provide working for an agency. So I feel it's important to able to look at the skill sets that you learned in your previous industry, try to break down what is the transfer skill set that you can then apply to the agency. And I find that would be basically a few things: client management, time management, and also ability to learn very quickly, ability to produce results, produce steps that indicate growth, and also have that kind of growth mentality. Now, personally for me, now go on to the downside. I think with agency, there's perhaps this stereotype with it that it is very fast-paced, and I think that also does depend, honestly speaking, on what agency that you end up working for. So I would think sometimes agency size and also the client portfolio that they carry might also indicate whether there's a certain level of hecticness that is different across the board. That experience might be different from agency to agency, depending on the size of the agency, depending on the clientele, but also depending pretty much on the management and how they decide to do things. So in the sense that whenever you're interviewing for the agency itself, it's really, the onus is on you to actually ask them what is the pace really like, what is the expectation in terms of communication with the client, which is very important. For example, with the agency, for example, let's say there's a hard rule, say you must respond to your client's message within, let's say, 1 hour, just to tell them that, I'll respond to you, for example. So certain rules like that within the agency, for example, when it comes to communication, is something that you have to ask within the interview process itself. So that would lead you to know or to figure out whether this may be something you would actually want to, this agency is something you want to join. Other than that, I feel is that perhaps for me, on a personal note, is ability to pick things up quickly, there's always, I feel there's a level of speed that's needed. It may differ from person to person how they are able to pick things up quickly. Perhaps for me is that although I love picking things up quickly, like learning quickly, sometimes I think that my frustration is sometimes with myself in the sense that I can't. Sometimes I stumble on a problem when doing something and I refer to, like, internet to figure it out. Sometimes I realized I couldn't really figure out fast enough. Like, time is of the essence. So perhaps I think that impatientness may not be a good trait to have when working in an agency. Perhaps I think I think patience is required in the sense that whenever you're going through a learning curve itself, when you first join an agency, you must tell yourself that you take time, but at the same time you must tell yourself you must have the resilience to actually withstand any issues that you face whenever you're trying to learn to do certain things, or when certain things just doesn't seem to work, although you consulted the internet and try to figure out on your own before you actually talk to your colleagues. So I think perhaps the ability to disengage from the problem is necessary skill whenever you're working for an agency. So that's all for the sharing I have for today in terms of what is life like working for an agency on a day-to-day basis, what are the skill sets you need to do very well in a digital marketing agency, and what are the pros and cons of working for a digital marketing agency. So in this video, I hope it brought you as much value, and I hope that my tips actually kind of helped you a little bit here and there. And if you have any improvements of recommendations of how to actually improve upon those, like worksheets or templates, or even you want to share your own experience working for an agency, please do write down in the comments below.